Hello, guten Tag. Welcome to a new episode on the Divorce Couch. My name is Simone and I'm the divorce coach based in Germany.
And hi, my name is Claire and I'm a divorce coach based in Northern Ireland.
Hi, my name is Salma and I'm a divorce coach based in London.
Today, we're talking about are your emotions all over the place? Whether it is you're angry, frustrated, or you have even rage, you are in despair, you're full of sadness, all this might follow a certain pattern. So we thought we give this episode some time to help you create a little bit more self-compassion. So with that, you might be able to find yourself answers for your needs and what should you do when these emotions come up. So we have created a few questions to guide you through these emotions, because potentially you might be having what we will call, different. The question is, could this be loss? And loss is anything to do when you are going through life and all of a sudden your expectations or hope has been stopped by an occurrence. So you are no longer on the wave riding. So the question is, could this be loss happening for you? And the second question we're thinking about, if it is loss, what does loss look like? If we look at loss as grief, it comes with a certain set of emotions and with a certain set of behavior. And because we want to help you, because it's about takeaways, once we finished looking at the question whether it's part of loss, we would like to give you some active to-dos and some insights how you can apply this knowledge so you have a better agency of choice for you and for the people around you. So the first question is a very rather short one. When emotions are all over the place, do you still remember when you went through your divorce? Did you immediately think when you were angry or when you were sad, this had anything to do with loss?
I don't think I equated it to loss, especially I suppose in my own circumstances, because I had made the choice to leave. So it was difficult to understand that actually on some level I was grieving the loss of my relationship, because I almost felt like I haven't lost something, I've left something. But actually, it's important to understand that actually, no matter which side you're on, whether you're the one that's leaving or you're the one that has been left, there is always a sense of loss there. You know, the loss of the things that you were looking forward to, the life that you had, the plans that you had, the hopes and the dreams that you had. And that can be quite, significant regardless of who's done the leaving.
Absolutely. And I think this will be really good if we are looking into how this potential, knowledge, if it is grieving that you're going through, how will that help you to make better choices? And this is one of the things that I have experienced. Now that I know it was loss that I had experienced, it potentially would have prepared me better for what I was in for. Let's call it a ride. So how about you, Claire? Did you very, very quickly knew that this could potentially be anything to do with loss and grieving, all these emotions? And what emotions did you experience?
Yeah, I think I did actually, because we had done an IVF journey and quite a long time with miscarriages to have our boys. So I was 4 and 6, and they were 4 and 6 when I left my marriage, as you know. And so for me, it was tied up with this feeling of, I never thought I would bring children into the world and we wouldn't be a family of 4. So I connected it with grief really quickly because of that. What I will say is I didn't understand grief really well. So I connected it to the concept, but I didn't quite have a framework because I didn't really understand it. And it was through reading and understanding and figuring out a little bit more that I began to go, oh, okay, so there's a pattern of emotions that are connected to the journey of grief, and they're not all in a straight line.
Yes,
so
I was about to say that.
And so
Yeah,
because
what
I felt was I flipped a lot. And I think I had a few overarching emotions. And when I think back, one of them, when you talked about self-compassion, I thought I had no idea how to do that. Because what I found was I would get frustrated and annoyed with myself for being upset for so long, or for letting something that happened get under my skin so much. So I turned a lot of it around and criticized myself. And I think knowing now, if I'd understood that there is a pattern and a process and understanding it, I would have been more compassionate with myself, but I didn't know how to do that because I didn't really understand it. And I know that I work well when I understand something.
Yeah.
So I connected it to grief, but I didn't have a connection from grief to what that might mean.
Yeah.
And how that would outwork for me.
Mm-hmm. So shall we have a look and uncover what this could potentially be? So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has looked at death and has come up with a concept of, it's kind of like energy going up and down and going up again. Okay, voila! I just lost my light, so I'm back to dark. So sorry, my light just started on.
I'm still seeing you, Simone. You still look as lovely as always.
Okay, well, so she has in a book on death and dying. She has basically come up with the grief cycle, and she said that grief is typically conceptualized as a reaction to death. And though it can occur anytime, and I think I mentioned that in reality, if it is not what we wanted, hoped for, or expected. Mm-hmm. And this grief cycle is embedded in 5 stages. It begins with denial. And if we look at it at a curve, so basically it's the denial, and then we go up, anger. It's kind of like an energy curve. And then it peaks and we come down. And it goes into bargaining, and then it goes even lower. So basically, it's almost kind of like this on the 0 axis. And then we are in this depressive phase, and it will slowly come up, and we go into acceptance. And as you said, Claire, it is not linear, but it is important that we potentially maybe give it 5 minutes to unpack each phase, each stage, and what could it look like? Because you know what, and you again said it, it's not only a concept, it comes with feelings, it comes with emotions, and it can look like behavior. Mm-hmm. And then let's unpack what could each stage potentially look like, and what could we potentially feel. I'm guessing that Selma might have had a call coming in, or kids come home. So shall we begin with the very first one, with the denial one?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that one. So
thank you.
I think you're right, though, because when I think of the word denial, I think, well, it's not happening. And then I think, well, I was the one who left my marriage, so I knew it was happening. So my question would be, does denial apply to me? But when you unpack denial in the framework that Kubler-Ross discussed it in, she has pulled in words such as avoidance and confusion and feeling numb and blaming. And I thought, oh, I did a lot of that. So suddenly that word denial starts to make a lot more sense in the framework of my outworking, and as you say, behaviors and things. And when you look at the blame, I was sort of thinking, well, you know, if I had only done, and I started blaming myself for things. So those words, that the likes of feeling numb, I think feeling numb comes for every person on a divorce journey, because even though I did the leaving and I know that my ex-husband was numb, I was too, because suddenly I had said it out loud and here we were, and there was now what do I do? So there was a numbness, and there was this sense of goodness, and did I do the right thing? And the confusion comes in. So that, for me, finding out more about what does the denial imply, definitely I could go, yes.
Yeah. I think, also in preparation for this, there is an importance to these phases. I mean, to be in denial is almost protecting you of going right into the sadness, right? You know, it is kind of like helping us cope and to ease into the grieving, to ease into the loss. So it's a very natural response in us to know to not go all raw in, but you know what, to immediately kind of like say, no, we don't want this. It's kind of like when Emma has done this in her biology class, or no, when she's applying now for a course, psychology course, she said, did you know that we don't immediately experience pain, because when events happen, I'm almost kind of like in the freeze event, in an accident, or we also talk
first.
We numb first.
Yes.
So this could be compared to this being in denial, kind of like we go numb first, and then the pain might potentially set in later. Simon, we were talking about, you know, but how had you experienced the very first stage, you know, but the denial, how did it go for you? Do you remember? Or
I think my stage of denial was very early on. So it was because I think my grieving started quite a bit earlier than me actually having made that decision to leave. Mm-hmm. So my denial was very much around, a bit like Claire actually, was very much self-critical, that this can't be happening. I've got to fix this. It's my fault. I've got to do better. I've got to change. And I think, you know, this is, you know, when I was reading around this subject, I think, you know, denial can also be sometimes at the point that I made that decision, I'd already been through, I think, the anger stage. Wow. You know, the bargaining stage where I tried to change everything, and then I got to, you know, acceptance. But I think from my ex-husband's perspective, the way that I saw denial was a complete refusal to engage in the process. Yeah. And I think at that time, because I was fueled going back and forth between the different emotions that I had, I was very threatened by that denial to engage in the process. I almost felt like there was a power struggle going on. Now, having, you know, years of like studying the grief cycle and the various aspects within divorce, now I see the situation very differently. You know, I feel, not, I'm not apologizing for this, because obviously we can only work with what we know at that point in time. But I do feel as if his complete denial to engage in the process and almost like go off and bury his head in the sand, which he did for quite a significant amount of time, was actually his way of denying that actually this was happening. Even though I suppose on some level, on some level we both must have known that the relationship was breaking down. But I think when you finally say those words, I think it can still come as quite a shock, and it takes time for, you know, either party or both parties, depending on where you are within the grief cycle, to actually sort of, I suppose, process what that actually means. Yeah. And if we're not ready to process it, then we'll just deny that it's happening. Yeah. So then let's move from here to the next level. So if we go back to the energy, so the energy is now rising, and going from the denial, we are now going into anger. And this is very, very energetic, and it serves a purpose, right? So basically also anger energizes that word, energizes us, right? And it helps us to do something, or to basically be aware of that we are feeling something and there is loss, and we want to, you know what, we want to have a reaction to it. We're humans, right? We do feel that this is maybe not fair, or I'm angry that happened, or I resent that the change is happening. I might even feel out of control, and the emotion of that, all that is called anger, right? And Yeah.
Again, how did you potentially come across anger, or did you not let that happen? Because you know what? There's two types of people out there. There's those who are stuck in anger all the time. You know what? They cannot get past it. And then there are those who don't allow themselves to become angry. So they suppress that, right? Which is also quite unhealthy. So you have to smile there, both of you.
Yeah, I did, because I was very angry. But I think there's a perception that, anger is not a good emotion. Like, when we talk about somebody being angry, we're almost like, it's like, oh, angry is not nice. Angry is horrible. Angry means you're mean. Angry means, but actually, I think anger is an emotion, like you said, that is telling you that something is going on that you may need to sort of protect yourself from, or you need to take action, or you need to do something. And I think what is really important with anger is the way that it manifests. There are good ways to show anger. There are bad ways to show anger. Right. And I think that's where, if you can understand what's going on for you at that moment in time, yes, you're absolutely within your rights to feel the emotions that you're feeling. And I think it's really important that we don't feel ashamed of being angry, or we don't be self-critical about being angry. This is something that has triggered our emotions. What we need to do is find ways to express that anger in a healthy way. Because, holding it in isn't going to help either. Lashing out, probably not going to have the best outcome either.
Yeah, so, not the most productive.
Yeah. So it's about finding ways to say, I think giving yourself permission to say, yes, I've got every reason to be angry right now. But how can I find ways to sort of channel that? And I'm not saying that that's easy. That is like probably one of the hardest things to do, because we do just want to, at that moment in time, sort of express our anger, and we absolutely should. But we want to, over time, I think we want to be able to learn how to express that in a healthy way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think there's two things that come to mind for me. There is being on the receiving end of somebody else's anger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of this. So if anger is in the process of grief, which is the process of cycle of loss, that is in a divorce journey, we will experience anger from the other person. And what do we do with that? And how do we react with that? And so that is another side to anger, that it's not to do with how I manage my emotions around anger. It's how do I manage dealing with somebody else's anger that is aimed directly at me. And so that is one thing, because being on the receiving end of somebody's anger is a difficult place to be, because sometimes you're not quite sure what to say or what to do or how to respond or whatever. And I think the other thing that comes to mind for me is that, what is your map of the world, for want of a better phrase? What is your upbringing understanding of whether anger is healthy or not healthy, or normal or not normal? That will impact whether you show anger or not. I would say for me, I didn't show a lot of anger, but I had sort of learned in my life to push it so far down that somebody said to me, you must be angry. And I was like, no. And then every so often there were glimpses, and I thought, oh, maybe. But I had become so normalized to not showing anger, not in a conscious way, but it was a subconscious thing. So when I looked at anger, and then I did more research on it in relation to the loss cycle, it talked about things you mentioned, Sam. It talked about, shame and embarrassment, and these are all part of an anger thing. And so I thought, okay, well, some of those emotions, frustration, anxiety, they're all part of the anger section within a grief cycle. And I thought, again, it's the same thing. When I unpacked the meaning of the word within this context, I could identify with some of those things. I would say that I would have been unhealthy with my anger because I didn't allow myself to feel angry when actually it was there, but I didn't quite know what to do with it. But that's because of my interpretation of the world and what anger is and was. And I now understand it better, and I would feel now that I am now able to express anger in a healthy way. But these are things that I've learned over time. So the thing, when I hear anger, one of the things that springs to my mind is being on the receiving end of somebody else's denial. Anger had an impact, and what did I do with that, and how did I internalize that to be? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Totally. Let's move forward. I mean, we could actually talk at each stage, right? And maybe we should, and unpack, because you just so beautifully said anger is not only, or is rage on one side, but it could be embarrassment on the other side, right? So how would that look like? You know what? And what behavior would come with that? So maybe we will have to give that more time. But in order to just wrap up the loss cycle, we have 3 more. So the next level, so basically anger is the peak of the energy. We're coming down slowly. We're getting more and more exhausted. The energy is now kind of slowly coming down. But before we do that, before we go and slump down, we have what we call bargaining. So bargaining is the moment when we look at it from the divorce perspective, that now potentially I kind of like go back. It's like, I'm not angry anymore. Maybe I can change in one way or the other for the partner to stay, or to potentially, if I am the leaver and I haven't made the official decision yet that I'm leaving, this could be the point where I might have thought about I'm leaving, but maybe I give my marriage a little bit more time. And this could be the point where we might go into couples therapy. But that could be a joint decision, but it could also mean it's only one person is going back into this bargaining, kind of like trying to stop a process from happening. So how did it unfold for you? Do you have any conscious memories of that stage? Because we did. I mean, I remember that we were asked by a friend, said, did you really do everything? Did you really try everything? And then she says, I think you owe your children a couples therapy. And I would pretty much say, okay, we probably were done by now, both of us, but we kind of couldn't get us to the decision making. I said, okay, we cut the ties. That's when we went into couples therapy. Needless to say, it didn't work. So
yeah. But you know that you've tried everything, and so there is a thing about that. I mean, I know for me, because a bit like you, Salma, I did a lot of my processing before I left, and so I had a conversation with my ex-husband about 1.5 years before I left, and one of my things was, I want us to do marriage therapy, couples counseling, to see, and I suppose that would fit into this bargaining thing of, okay, let's see if we can figure out and sort out and understand each other better and do all of that. And, I mean, I know that, it took quite a bit of time, but it improved and then disimproved again. And so for me, by the time I got to the leaving, the bargaining then, would be a little bit like finding meaning in it, struggling to tell your story to people. It's the figuring it out, making sense. And sometimes we verbalize that out loud. And we do that in conversations with people, and that's where you can find yourself going round and round and round. So there's the bargaining with the partner and in your own head about here, but there's also the making sense of it over here. So there's again two, and I did both of those at different stages in the whole process, because my whole process was quite long and almost in 2 sections, I suppose you'd say.
Yeah.
How about you, Salma?
I think I went between angry and bargaining for a very long time. So I'd be bargaining. I think my bargaining manifested itself in me trying to change myself. Like, if I do this, then it'll be okay. If I do this, if I work harder, if I be a better mom, if I be a better wife, if I stay quiet, all of these things that I felt were at that time the reasons for the breakdown of our marriage. Obviously now I know better, but at that time it was very much all, what am I doing wrong? And then I would try something and then it wouldn't quite work, and then I'd go back into the angry stage, and then I would be angry, and then I would think of something else that I could possibly do to change. So I literally went back and forth between angry, bargaining. And I think that was a very difficult sort of time, because it was just a yo-yo of emotions. Or maybe I can try this. Okay, that's not worked. I'm back to angry, and it was all, the anger was very self-inflicted. It wasn't even anger at, a part of it was, I suppose, angry at my ex-husband, but a lot of it was very much of, why can't you fix this? And I think that is what the emotion that was the most destructive.
Yeah. And if we now take that, what you just said, and look into the classical cognitive divorce process, it could also very well be that somebody who is stuck at this point will not come to the negotiation table and will always try to boycott any moving forward, because they cannot let go. They are trying to find ways into getting the other person back to the table in order to not have a very natural flow of a separation. Means at what point we will be two separate lives, and we will have to figure out how that will look like. We have been a unit, but we are no longer now. And I'm reading this very interesting book, and I think it's called The Impasse of Divorce. And it talks about why people are potentially so stuck or go around and end up in these high conflict divorces. And that could be one of them. They will not. One of them is always going back to, I can't let go. I can't let go. I'm kind of like so fixated on staying one way or the other in this relationship, healthily or unhealthily. They pull the other person back.
And would that link back then into denial? They're in denial that this is a reality. Because the thing that I'm picking up on this is there is no time frame for each section of the 5 stages. And there is no pattern that is followed. You can go from one to the other and pull in a bit of the other one. Because what I'm hearing from what you're saying, Simone, is that that person who doesn't really want to let things go and not sure how to make them stay, they're still in denial. It's still coming through with the anger and the bargaining.
Yeah. So and there's absolutely in a couple of minutes go back to what this potentially means if we look at making decisions. What to be aware, I guess, to be aware and mindful of these stages in order to go where you want to go into a peaceful future. So after bargaining comes what we have mentioned, that we call them the duvet days. And as cute as a duvet day may sound, this is not like a Sunday me time day. No. This is a very, very tough phase. This is what sadness looks like. Despair, helplessness, no drive. It is not clinically depression, but it is still a depressive phase where our energy is at its lowest. I think I've done very little of that. I'm a pusher, right? I kind of like push through that. So maybe I have to at one point, give myself more duvet days. But how about you? I mean, I know that you're all very strong women, but do you remember what it looked like when you were really energetically at a rather low point, and how that looked like?
I think we all probably can in different ways. I think depression, that real deep sadness that you're feeling, doesn't necessarily have to manifest itself as a duvet day. No. I think it's when for me, I see that sort of that stage just before acceptance, where you're almost like you need that period of sadness because you are coming to the acceptance that there is nothing else that can be done.
Yeah.
And the being, it is exhausting, vacillating between those different emotions is incredibly exhausting. And it can, this time period, like Claire said, it's not like, like 5 days of this and 5 days of that. This can be going across, weeks, months, sometimes even years of going back and forth, back and forth. And I think for me, I felt like my depression set in when I finally gave up trying. That was my sort of almost okay, now I have nothing left to give.
Yeah.
And I think I let go. So I think I was on the cusp of acceptance, but I think I needed that period of time to reach acceptance by really thinking, actually, I can't do anymore. I can't give anymore. I don't want, in reality, it was like I didn't want to do anymore, because for me, I was exhausted mentally, physically. And that for me, I needed that period of time to just sort of hide away from the world, not necessarily talk to anybody, because I think, during that period, I suppose I'd spent a lot of time talking to people and had a lot of different opinions and had a lot of different sets of advice. And what I really needed to do was to hide away from the world and make sense of it for myself. And I think that period of time was when I felt the saddest, sort of creeping towards the acceptance that actually my life was now very different, or going to be very different.
Before I come to you, Claire, I just realized that that's not true. That was actually the time when I asked for help. And that is when I realized I can't do this on my own. I was just so upset and without any more energy to move forward on my own. And then from there went into acceptance. So sorry. Yeah. So no, yeah.
But I love the way you framed this whole thing about energy, because I talk to all my clients about energy and where we put our energy and how important it is to notice it, because I never noticed any of this during my journey. I never thought about energy, but the framework for energy and how this makes us feel and how we're able to manage our day and cope is so completely connected to being aware of our energy. And I would say my story has had the added complication layer of about 11 months after I left my marriage, my mom died suddenly in an accident. And so my journey was complicated with another layer of grief and loss in its real terms. And because my dad was at the very early stages of a dementia pathway that we hadn't had diagnosed at that point, we then, there was the loss of my dad as a, suddenly I had to become his daughter and his nurse daughter. And so my journey of divorce has been intertwined with all of this. And so it is, and I remember clearly, because when mum died, it was 6 weeks before Christmas. And I remember thinking, so about 2 weeks before Christmas, thinking this is the first Christmas of separated parents and we have to navigate this. And my dad was on his own 5 hours away from where I lived. And I remember clearly having this vision in my head thinking, I am going to have to put mum and all that stuff in suitcases on a shelf behind my head, because I have no capacity to deal with that. This needs my attention now. So I didn't have a lot of duvet days because I had different things that came into my world that needed my attention. My children needed me, my dad needed me, my work, I was doing diplomas. But what happened then is, as we all know, our bodies do so much and then our bodies go, that's it, we're done. And so the following summer, I ended up with migraines for about 6 weeks and off work. Yeah. And I put it down to that. And I go, so my time at that point was quite a bit further on, because I had kept going because I didn't know how to do anything different. But that acceptance, that sort of, whole depression time and figuring out and understanding probably came more at that time in the summer when I got the migraines, because I couldn't function at work with a computer because of my migraines. And so, sometimes when we don't give things the time that they need, because of whatever circumstance, it's not that I didn't want to or that I chose not to, our bodies find a way of every stage is important, and we have to go through it, even if it's further down the line, because it's a healthy thing to get us to the next phase, I think.
I'm so with you. I think it will manifest itself one way or the other if we don't go into this phase and acknowledge, what a marathon this is. And if we don't give it to us, which in brackets can happen if the lever is so far away ahead of you without bearing in mind, what to give space to the levee. This could happen that you kind of like, you run behind to make sense. And then this can easily happen that it will show itself at a later stage. I think most of my clients come at this stage to me. Most of my clients, when I read the email, say, I'm lost for words. I am so stuck. I don't know how to move on. Can you please? And this is when they then say, can you please help me? This is then where they're asking for help. I mean, really, literally, please help me. This is the stage where I get most clients come to me. Yeah,
I would agree. I think the adrenaline that, I think before that, a bit like what you said, Simone, earlier, where, you're a doer. So you were doing things and you were just kind of pushing through. I think by the time you get to the stage of depression, that's all sort of filtered out. You don't have any more energy to carry on. Yeah. And I think, that's where you're right. Clients generally it's almost like, okay, where do I go from here now?
Yes. How do I step forward?
Yeah.
And you're right. Yeah. That's the help of, I don't know how to start something new. I don't know how to do this. Yeah.
How do I even get up? I remember, feeling, at that time is like, where do I even start picking up the pieces? I didn't know where to start putting my life back together again.
And that client came exactly for that reason. A client contacted me, and we picked up today where I thought, we're done. But again, she's back at the stage. Yeah. Something happened along a line where she said, shoot, she was so far, I thought, on her journey, but then it kept coming back. So I think it is important also to mention that divorce is just really, as we also talk about this is not a mold, right? We don't go in, it is a year, and then you're over, and then you go.
No one size fits all.
It can, prolong itself. So, but luckily, slowly, after we've given ourselves some time, and we recovered, we're going into our next phase. And our next phase, it's the final one, it's acceptance. And the acceptance stage is not necessarily the one where we get up in the morning and say, woo, live, here I come. It's probably the moment when we realize there is some learning in this. There's potentially a future. It's kind of like, you've kind of like taken, cut the curve, what's it? There's a term, I think, you kind of like, you kind of like
turn the corner.
Yeah, you turn the corner, you get a sense, you kind of get a sense, you've come to terms with, this is it, okay? What is potentially waiting for me? And I think, this is probably the most healthy phase to now discuss parenting plans, maintenance, everything that is really kind of like more cognitive, right? Because I'm slowly picking up, the energy is kicking in, and I accept of what is, and then with that I have a better mindset in going to the negotiation table.
I would say that's ideal. I would say that's the ideal, but the reality is when you have children, you have to sort out parenting plans fairly early on in the middle of the other stages.
Oh no, I think so, but I'm talking about the ones that go into the court order. I mean, this is basically where you officially now talk facts. Of course, we kind of like probably just maneuvered through one way or the other, for better or for worse. We maneuvered. But this is then when we do it in writing. So how about for you? How do you remember the acceptance?
I remember the acceptance stage for me as having, well, what's possible? What do I want? And then I remember thinking, I have no idea. And that was the start of my acceptance of, okay, so I'm here. So how do I want to do this? And I thought I hadn't been able to think about that because I had all the other stuff to go through. And I got to here and I thought, I don't know, what does that look like? What might I like it to look like? And I had never really asked myself what I wanted too much. So for me, the acceptance stage was a lot of finding out about me. You know, what way did I want to live? What way did I want to, how did I want to be? How did I want to respond emotionally to things, and learning and just finding my feet in a way that had more calmness to it. There was less up and down. It didn't overwhelm me as much. I was more stable, is probably a good word, but emotionally, triggers didn't fire me off so much. And then I was able to start thinking, and slowly, step by step, I found that there were longer, better days. And, oh, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. And it was that. But I would agree that actually that was when I was reaching out for different help and asking friends and doing different things. And I began to emerge. It's probably the best way to, when
I love that.
Yeah, I began to emerge more in my confidence and ability to live in this world as a single person, because it is true that everybody on a divorce journey has to find a new identity. And I remember when I read that a few days into having been separated, thinking, what on earth does that mean? But for me, that meant the acceptance stage of, well, I get to decide. Oh, what's that like? So that for me was that's what I remember. What about you, Salma?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the stuff that you said, that I think the acceptance stage comes with a stabilization of that emotional roller coaster.
Yes.
So that actually the interactions you're having, you can see a little bit more clearly. Because I think it's so full on up until that point. I personally felt like I didn't really have a grasp on anything up until the point where I got to acceptance. And then I think it was like I said, you know, having that period of time to think, okay, where do I start picking up the pieces? Because I knew that, okay, now I have the opportunity to start again, and having that energy and the willingness to start again and putting my life back together again. And I think that's where, for me, acceptance was quite important. I think the only one of the questions that I was going to ask when I was listening to you both, because I think this is something that comes up quite a lot for clients, is like, how long will it take for me to get to acceptance? When am I going to feel better? And what I wanted to ask, I think all three of us, is like, how long did it take for you guys to get to that stage of acceptance?
You know what? That's interesting and beautiful that you put this question out there. And I hope your viewers are still with us, because I think this is a really important episode, and it's very raw and very, very honest. I was just thinking that I think with every decision process, with divorce, I'm going through a small grief cycle, because every time even in my life now, with the children, and they're going to see their dad, for example, right? And I have to get used to that. So if we just say, okay, we look at the divorce cycle from the perspective of a couple is splitting, there is so much. If we go back to what Kübler-Ross said, or what I think the author of the source that I prepared with for today said, is basically everything that is going from one status quo into the new status quo means I am in denial first because I don't want to accept it. And then I get mad because I don't want things to change. And then I'm just trying to really hold on for a very long time to remain in the status quo that is about to change. And then, you know what, we've had that, we spoke, and then I cry because I'm really upset for it to happen. And then the acceptance is, you know what, I kind of like walk through the wall that I've banged against, and then I walk through it. And then all of a sudden I'm accepting the change of the status quo. So I think it is, I think that one of the takeaways of this episode is ever happening in our life constantly. And as for the divorce, I think it can take, I mean, I've been separated for how many years now? Almost 10 years, and we still have issues. So I still have to go through certain grief cycles in order to make sense, which are related to a marriage that no longer is. So it can go on for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I think I have, and this is kind of like without really finishing it, but I think this is one of the takeaways. Knowing about this doesn't always prepare me for the intensity of my emotions that I'm feeling, but it helps me to understand what I'm experiencing, and I can handle it better. I can accept the emotions before I go into the acceptance. If that makes sense.
I think also it gives language to articulate it to a friend. You know, when any of us phone each other, we have better language now to be able to describe what's going on and why we're upset, I think. Listening to what you were saying there, Simone, I found it very interesting, because the thing that came to my mind from what you were saying at that point was that resonated for me was that when I learned the importance of focusing on what I can control versus what I can't control, I come to acceptance quicker when I do that. And that's a lot of what I teach and speak to my clients about, is when we take our focus off what we can't control, which is what somebody else wants, or what, you know, the likes of, you know, your children going to their partner, to your ex-partner for, say, Christmas, and the loss cycle that comes with that, again, because it happens, you know, frequently. When I take my eyes off the concept of, you know, I'm going to miss them and I wish this hadn't happened, onto what can I control, and I go, well, what would I like to do with my Christmas this year? What's the best way I can prepare my children to go and have a good time with their dad, whatever it happens to be? That's when I find acceptance comes faster into my world, through the lens of where I put my focus. And when I was listening to you, I don't think I had that clarified as much as I do now. When I listened to you, I thought, that's what's helped me. So acceptance for me, to answer your question, Salma, has come over time of understanding the things that help me to get to that place. So I can get to a place of acceptance faster now in things that happen in my world, because I have better tools to be able to navigate them on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one last question is, how are we taking what we've just looked at into reality? We can, I think, you know what, just to begin, it's not only about us. I think it is because we are a system. I think it is very important to know that if we as the parent or the adult go through it, so will our children. And if we feel that it will be too much for us, depending on where we are and how intense we are experiencing a phase, I think the one gift we can give our children is giving them external support, so they then maybe also age appropriately, guide them, help them, if it is possible. I don't know, maybe it's a school counselor, maybe it is a children's coach. I think this is really important to know that we're not the only people having that. And children, of course, you know, but depending on their age, have a lot less vocabulary to go through this. And I think it's probably too much to expect that we as a parent experiencing anger, frustration, despair, whatever, to believe we can now be, you know, what, the right neutral person to help our children. So I'm a huge supporter of giving our children external help if we feel something is off, you know, but just be really aware, just have a close eye on your child. Stomach ache is too much, big classic, right? You know what, I hear it over and over again. My mom, because I come from a divorce background, she said I had always stomach ache, and she took me to the doctor, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't something physical, it was something somatic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what will you you know what, take from here, any task, any to-dos for our viewers, how the loss cycle could help you?
I think most importantly is to accept and give yourself permission to feel those emotions. and not be upset at yourself for going back and forth. Because I think what sometimes can happen is you think, oh, right, yeah, I feel much better today. I'm getting on with my life. I'm over this. I'm not angry. And then, you know, a couple of days later, you find yourself back in the same place. And then, you know, it can be very easy to be self-critical, you know, and the questions like, you know, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get over this? You know, or, you know, and I think, you know, when we understand that the grief cycle is not a straight line, it is like a back and forth until you've processed and made peace with those emotions. I think that's what's really important to understand is, you know, give yourself time, give yourself, you know, find ways to process the emotions that you're feeling. Give yourself permission to feel them. Don't try to pack them away, because like, you know, I think like you said, Claire, you know, when you were just sort of packing that anger away, you're just internalizing it. You're not actually dealing with it. So at some point, it's going to come back. So what we want to do is, rather than internalize these emotions and, you know, try to pretend that it's not okay to have negative emotions. I don't think there are any positive or negative emotions. It's how we process them. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be really sad at the fact that you know, your whole life has changed. It's okay to be scared that you don't know how you're going to pay the bills this time next month, or it's okay to not know what to do with, you know, there's so many unknowns at that point in time. All of these emotions are completely valid. So give yourself permission to feel them and then process them. Don't sort of just pack them away and hope that they're going to go away.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, I think the thing that I wish I had sooner on my journey was this episode of actually being able to put into what I've heard, oh, okay, well, I recognize that. And yes, I've done that. Because it took me quite a long time through reading different things before I found this, to be able to understand my world more. And because, as I've said, I find I can process things when I understand them. So when I'm trying to figure it out, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand it, because I know it's like when I understand something, it's like there's a penny drop moment. Okay, so that's it. And so for anybody that's watching this episode, if you know somebody who's going through a divorce or a loss, whatever type of loss, not just divorce, whether it's the loss of a job through illness or whatever it happens to be, this episode might help them in more ways than you would know, because having an understanding and a framework to normalize something, I think for me, the biggest takeaway for all of you listeners is these are normal emotions in a totally random order, but yet there is a pattern amongst it when you know to look for it. And it's when you know what to look for that you realize it's not just you, it's normal. And it's not a set thing, and it comes and goes, but with time and with understanding, it becomes, the highs become less high and the lows become less low. And I internalized it and I was very self-critical. And my biggest thing would be, please be kinder to yourself, because this journey is tough. And it's going to be tough, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You don't stay here. This is the pass through. I love the phrase that says, this too shall pass. You will get through this and you will get to a better place. But at the moment, it may feel like it's very sludgy.
I shall throw in one last thing, and I think I've touched on that during the episode. The other day, I had a presentation together with a lawyer, and I think it is important, because you said you were doing the leaving. Once we know that this is happening, I think we can give the separation, the unfolding of the separation, the gift of knowing, of this knowledge and of the awareness. Because if this is happening to both partners, and we will most likely not be aligned, it will not happen at the same time.
Right. Yes, you're right.
Please, you know what, bring up the awareness for the decision-making processes which will happen in divorce, But maybe that is the gift to say, you know what, can I, in one last attempt to do the right thing, think of the couple, one last thing as a biosphere, to bring in Terry Real's term here, because it will make all the difference if I am aware of the other partner might still have to process and go through anger. And if, you know what, if things go really wrong and the other person, because you or one of you out there is going to push for the divorce and the other person is in denial or in anger, it will come back, because that is not the emotion. You are coming to the table to make a good contract that you will happily live with for the future. So, right. So this is what I presented, because, you know, but it could very well be that once I'm in acceptance mode and then I'm like, oh, by the way, I'm leaving you. And then from now, my ex-partner is receiving the letter from the lawyer. This is just so off. This is basically so out of sync. It cannot possibly have a good outcome because of the system that we're in. So I think that is very important. And I think, you know what, I don't know whether we've said that, picking up of what you said about the anger, these are important stages. There is potentially a reason why you haven't been in that stage. So the question is, maybe you would just want to take a moment tonight or tomorrow, or speak with a friend and say, you know what, there's something that I haven't been through it. You know what do you think? Do you have maybe somebody I can speak to? Because it will manifest itself one way or the other, physically, somatically in your body. So these are also pointers for you, not only to anticipate what is potentially still waiting for you. Also, you want to be accepting of these are emotions that are arising or feelings that come with it. So I'm a big Googler. If you just key in, you know what, divorce and the grief cycle, you might, because we have talked about this is not only feelings, it also portrays itself as behavior.
Yeah.
You might get a little bit more clarity of, you know, what is in for you and why you do certain things the way you do. And if you've decided I've had enough, well, then, you know, potentially, or you can ask the right questions. You know what can I possibly do now to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
I think this was a very long, very lengthy, very beautiful, very important episode. Thank you. Please like, subscribe, and all the best from Claire, Salma, and I.
Yeah. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye now.